Hello, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, evening, or good night, whenever you could be possibly listening to this. You are listening to another episode of Uncomfortable with Kirk and Vince. I am Vince, and Kirk is hanging out over on the other side of the mic right there with his wonderfully bearded self. Kirk, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, brother. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Excited about our topic for the evening. Tonight, continuing with the fact that this is our lot and call for this podcast, we are going to talk about something that likes to make all of us feel uncomfortable, and hopefully we'll make ourselves uncomfortable as well as just about anybody else that'll listen to it. But hopefully we will inspire and help to cause you to want to go dig through the word for yourselves.
You
So
know,
tonight we're going to talk about that lovely, lovely, lovely subject of, what's that term we call it? The rapture.
I really wish that Tony was here to talk with us tonight. He
Oh, yeah?
loves biblical prophecy and he loves anything to do with the end times. And it would be so fun for us to bring him on one evening. We'll have to see if he can join us, here in the near future. But I completely agree. I hope that this makes all of us a little uncomfortable because many times as believers, what happens is we get in the habit of taking the path of least resistance. So
Ooh, guilty.
we'll take what we read and we won't really dig into it. I mean, the reality is, like we learned in Bible college, if you don't understand the context of the word that was written, you will just take it at face value. Not only the context, but even the cultural context. And you and I had the wonderful benefit of having an Old Testament and New Testament survey teacher, Dr. Jeffrey Seif, that would explain the Jewish roots as he would go through the Old and New Testament and would really challenge sometimes our thinking about things. Because a lot of the modern teachers would completely dismiss the Jewish culture when the book itself was written by Jewish people.
Wow, really? You
Yeah.
think that might
So,
have been a thing?
yeah. So, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, why do we discount the cultural relevance of the way that they might write, the way that they think, the common way that they would say certain things? It's kind of like I've learned in Spanish because I'm trying really hard to learn Spanish. And as an old Southern boy, it's not really easy, to get past all the slurring and the, improper everything, it's real easy to become passive.
Well, I'm fairly certain your wife would probably
Oh,
make fun of you a little bit.
she would make fun of me more than a little. And she would harass me quite heavily for the fact that for more than 20 years, I have not quite picked up Spanish like I should have. But being as it may, what I've been learning as I've been going through my time of study and as I go on mission trips even, down into Latin America, I find out that just because one group of people takes a certain phrase a certain way doesn't mean that another one takes it the same. So you could actually say something that could be very innocent in one culture and say it in another and it'd be a high insult. So
That's even the same thing here in English, though, here in America.
there you go.
You could be in one part of the country and one phrase is totally normal and it has no troubles, no issues. And another one, it's an extreme insult.
And with that in mind, we have to consider cultural relevance, the way that people would, carry themselves when they were writing these writings.
Right.
And if we don't, we do a disservice to what God's trying to speak to us. Now, can God speak to us even if we're ignorant about things? Absolutely. Because he's gracious. He's going to, I don't remember which teacher it was when you and I were in school, but I remember him standing in front of the pulpit, in front of the student body and saying, guys, if you're visiting a church, and it's the most boring, dead church that you've ever been to in your life, dry as dead bones. He goes, and you're not receiving something from the Holy Spirit, you're the one that's in error. And he said that no matter what, if you are plugged into the Lord, if you're chasing after him in his presence, no matter who is speaking, Holy Spirit will always teach you something. And that stuck with me a long time, because the reality is it's not the minister's responsibility to be tuned into the Lord for you. He's responsible to be tuned in so he can get the word, but he's also responsible for himself. It's our individual responsibility to be tuned into the Lord so that we can hear what the Holy Spirit's trying to tell us individually, so that we're not going to be completely dry or misled, because we're all human. And like we tell people, you and I both, we tell people, guys, always study the word. No matter what you're hearing from me, any minister that you're listening to, you always need to take it to the word and compare it so that you can make sure that everything lines up with the Holy Scriptures. Now, getting back to our main topic. In the book of Revelations, we hear a lot about the second coming of Christ. We hear a lot about, there's going to be all these prophetic signs and there's going to be all these wonders. And a lot of people, as they read the book of Revelations, one of the very first mistakes that they make is they believe that chapter 1 to the very last chapter is in chronological order. And it's not. It's a group of dreams that the Apostle John wrote down, and he can only write them in a certain order because they're not the same dream. Now, all the dreams fit together to tell us a story. But the thing is we cannot take everything in chronological order that's there in Revelation, right?
That's true.
So we have to look at it, study it, and then pray for the Holy Spirit to give us some revelation, some depth as to what is being said, that he gives us the wisdom. It's the Spirit tells John, write these words down, that, those basically saying those that are coming next, they're going to be able to discern this later on, even to the point to where when he writes down the mark of the beast, number 666, that he's like, hey, write this down, because there's going to be one that's learned enough to where he's going to understand what this means. And
well, even if you were looking at Revelation in a chronological aspect, even though it may not have been necessarily in that way that he received it, even if you do look at the way it's laid out, it's fairly clear, if you don't allow yourself to be distracted by certain things, that some of the things that are coming are well beyond when the church has been taken up to be with Jesus at the marriage supper.
Right.
Like, I used to think that we would all be here to see the Battle of Armageddon, but after looking through and digging and searching, it seems to me, and I stress the word seems, because I am not a full-on doctorate biblical scholar and have not studied extensively in this aspect. We're touching on it as believers who have studied some, but it's mainly to open up the topic of conversation and to touch on the things that are uncomfortable for a lot of people that maybe they haven't been able to get the answers to. Maybe they haven't been able to ask. They feel uncomfortable asking the question to those who are leaders and things of that nature. But so we're touching on them because they are uncomfortable to talk about sometimes. But you can tell that unless I am completely off and wrong, that we're not necessarily going to be here for the Battle of Armageddon in the sense that we're on the ground waiting for him to come back and fight the fight. If I'm understanding correctly, we'll actually be with him, behind him. Or
absolutely. That's exactly the way I read it as well, is that when Christ comes back, he's bringing his army, and those that are called, those who have given themselves to him, they will be riding alongside him, being a part of this battle. Now, if you read on, you really see it's not much of a battle because the kingdoms of the earth think that they're going to be able to rise up sword and whatever else, or basically modern warfare against the King of Kings. But the thing about the King of Kings is he can, with a word, take care of business. So if he's taking care of business with the word, what do you and I have that's really going to hold weight to anything that he's doing?
Right. So you and I were talking about this in preparation for, and so Kurt and I may or may not give our actual full belief on where we think it's supposed to go down. But so the word rapture doesn't even really exist in the scriptures. If anything, there's a phrase called that goes by. It says we'll be caught up into the air with him and taken to the marriage supper. But so it's the word rapture, I think, is something that we created later on as theologians and scholars to that point. So, and it's easy in conversation to refer to that word because when you say it a lot of times in Christian circles, they go, oh, okay, when we're taken up. So I don't have a problem using that word in that context.
Yep.
That it's just a reference point. But to follow the scripture itself correctly, it says to be caught up. But we were talking about it beforehand, and I said, I've seen so many or heard so many arguments for we're supposed to be what's known as pre-trib. So before what's called the Great Tribulation period, which is the 3.5 years of peace and then 3.5 years of total chaos, right? And tribulations. That we're supposed to be raptured before that. Some argue for we're supposed to go right about that 3.5 year mark, and that's why all chaos breaks out, is because there's that peace there. That's that final statement for us to know, hey, we don't have long. And then he takes us up, and then all chaos breaks loose. And then there's some that believe that sometime after that period, whether it be after the 7 years or sometime after that moment, whenever that may be, that's when we're supposed to be taken up, and that we have to endure some of those various things. Now, look, people can find scriptures in there to justify either one of those stances.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand it. I understand why some would say one or another. But several years ago, I just got, me personally, Kirk, I got to the point where it was more stressful to think about and try to figure out which one is he coming in. And it was so much easier, although the work is harder. Mentally, it was easier to go, you know what? I'm just going to try to be like the 10 virgins in Matthew 24. I'm going to make sure I have oil in my lamp and I'm ready for when he comes. And my responsibility is to do the best I can to make sure that my family is also in that same situation, that they're also have enough oil in their lamp and ready to go.
That's right.
And some people have kind of snidely looked at me and said, well, that's a cop-out. Well, not really, because the work that's required to make sure that you are on the ready versus just saying, oh, well, I've gotten till this point, and if I look out for these signs, that's when I need to get my life right for real. I mean, that's kind of like saying, well, we don't really have to try in the first through third quarter, but when we hit fourth quarter, then we really need to try. As opposed to just giving it your all 4 quarters.
And that's a dangerous game right there, dude, because let's just think about it. Watch the Dallas Mavericks play. I mean, back in the day when my wife and I followed them real strongly, real close, they were very well known to play. The first several quarters, it was just kind of, the last quarter, they would just kill it. And they would just take the game. And that's the year that they won the championship. Mm-hmm. And it was just amazing. But the thing is there were days that it worked. There was other days they could turn that fire on, but they're too far behind.
Right.
So the problem is if we don't keep our oil full and we don't keep that lamp trimmed, then it will be to the point to where we don't have the time to acquire the supplies needed for the journey.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
it's the same as like you think about, and I know Paul refers to us as running a race, and it's more like a marathon. And I've spoken to some people who I've read some people who've written about it, and I have like blogs about it, and I've known a couple people that have run marathons, and they have famously talked about all of them about hitting the wall, and some of them say there's actually two, and there's one about the 10 or 12 mile mark or something to that effect. Runners out there, you know what that is specifically, and you can write in us and teach us, because I don't remember what it is, and to be honest, I've never run a marathon. Uh, and some say it's somewhere in the 20s. When you're getting close to the end, you run into another one. And the thing is, you're not capable of running a marathon if you've never trained for it. One of the big things that they do in their training is they work on their endurance.
mm-hmm.
And it's the same application in this aspect, to be ready for whenever he comes, regardless of when that is. That means you have to be patiently enduring, being ready whenever he says, all right, here we go. And that takes a lot more effort. That takes a lot more work. And like you said in the very beginning about us wanting to be lazier or take the path of least resistance,
Mm-hmm.
I'm guilty of that in a lot of things in my life. And even now, after years of living that way, I'm trying to break some of those old habits. But this is an area that we can't just say, okay, let's just wait, and there's some signs that they say is there, so then I can get right, but right now I could just do whatever I want to do.
So you don't think that we're going to get swept away pre-trib?
I mean, personally, probably not so much. I mean, is it possible? Sure, but I personally don't lean that way, no.
So you think that
I mean,
we're
I
not
could be
going to,
wrong.
we're not, you think that we're not going to go all the way through it either. So you're more of the mid-trib.
Yeah, I kind of lean that way. I do. I really don't go looking and digging for the scriptures to prove my point on it, though, and my personal belief on it. It's just kind of what I'm like, well, based on what the scripture says and based on just some logical thought, I could definitely see that it would be more likely we would go then in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that that's a correct viewpoint. And that's why several years ago, I just said, you know what, instead of trying to focus on that and focus on paying attention to these signs all the time, if I just make sure that I'm ready, no matter when, because I'm not guaranteed to make it to that point anyway. We don't know when that point's going to be. It could be this year. It could be 4 years from now. It could be 20 or 30 years from now. It could be 100 years from now.
And it sounds like
I
you're
might not even be on the
referencing,
planet.
it sounds like you're referencing Matthew 24 around,
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm digging.
verses 26 through 44, where it says that no one knows the day nor the hour, not even the angels in heaven, but my Father only.
Yeah, that's true.
The reality is, I think in reality, what we really need as believers, and I didn't coin this phrase, another minister did, but I love it. It makes me happy every time I hear it said. And when I say it, I even kind of get a little smile on my face, but it's like, my personal belief is I don't give a rip trib. Because the reality is that when Christ comes back, I'm going to be happy no matter when it is.
That's true.
And even if the end comes and it ends up I'm giving my life for him, once I'm standing in front of him, I'm still good. I'm not having a problem. But the key is no matter what, even if we don't even make it to that point, we need to always be ready. Because the reality is it says that he will blot your name out of the book. It doesn't say he'll write your name in. So if he is blotting your name out at the end time, when your day comes and you're no longer on this earth, then that means he's already written out a story of what he's seen from outside of time. Because he sees all things. So he's got to be sitting outside of time to be able to see everything. So
Yeah.
he's already written everything out in his book. And he says, oh, John over there, and this is this is a fictional John. He's not real. John over there, I don't want someone that's listening, this name's John, to go, what is he picking on me for? No, it's not personal. This is just picking a random name, kind of like John Doe. We'll just say John Doe. John Doe over there, he didn't accept me. And so I've got to mark his name off the guest list. He didn't receive my invitation. It's kind of like if you get the VIP to the White House and you don't accept the RSVP and you show up, they say, yo, Vince, you're not on the list, man. Why? Because you didn't RSVP to that special event.
Right.
So it's the same thing. God sends us an invitation, and it has an RSVP on it, which is us saying yes to Jesus. And when we say yes to Jesus, we've RSVP'd our invite into heaven. And so when we get to the point to where that's the only thing that matters, that we keep everything good between us and Christ, everything else works out. I think we get too caught up on the details. Now, I'm not saying the word's not important. It's absolutely the most important thing. But we get so focused on these details that we lose the very substance of what's the most critical piece that Jesus wanted, which is to go into all the earth and preach the good news.
Yeah, instead of battening down the hatches and just hanging out inside of the basement waiting for him to come back.
Yeah,
we're supposed to be actually spreading the kingdom.
Yeah, he wants us to be out doing the work, and it's also stop arguing amongst each other in the pews or at the boardroom table and get out and do the work. Now, there's moments we have to come up with solutions, right? We know that. But when there's something that's not a critical salvation issue to your neighbor, to the person that's on the mission trip you're going to or whatever, why are you wasting your breath and your blood to argue a point that's not going to bring someone salvation?
Well, I mean, in First John 4, I believe the second half of it, I think it's from 7 all the way to 21. John's referencing the point of God is love, and that if we belong to him, then we also exhibit that same love and that love for one another. So and the funny part is, so we all tend to like to look at love as this big, warm, gushy, gooey feeling, right? And like these giant pillow arms that we just wrap up in and everything is safe and comfortable. But birds love their younglings, but they eventually start pulling all that cushion out of the nest so that they start getting uncomfortable and get poked and prodded by the different sticks that are in there to get them out of the nest.
And at a certain point, they'll push them out too.
Right. And Paul actually references that, and I was like, dang, Paul, I don't know if you're trying to put on peer pressure or what you're doing, but there's an actual point that says if your brother and sister are not doing what they're supposed to do, stop associating with them. And I was like, dang, hold up. And it says until they get it, this is Vince's version, until they get it through their thick skull that they're doing wrong, and they come back to the fellowship. And I was like, oh wow, that floored me. I was like, man,
he wasn't playing, man.
Just blew me away.
That's what it is. I mean, there's a point. Paul gets to the point. Now, let's keep in perspective. The Apostle Paul is the apostle that's responsible for the majority of the known earth hearing about Christ, right?
Yeah, the Gentiles. Yeah,
right. The Gentiles.
What we call the Gentiles. Yeah,
and which is the most of the world. Because Israel's a very small sliver with the rest of the planet. So Paul himself tells us, I have to beat myself daily. Now he's saying it figuratively, as in he disciplines himself, right? So he's basically saying, I discipline myself or I beat myself daily so that I can qualify to run the race. He didn't say to win it.
No, he said to qualify.
He said to qualify to run. So he's saying that I'm so concerned that if I don't keep myself in check, that I won't even qualify to run the race that I'm called to. So if Paul himself was so concerned that he had to continuously discipline his mind, discipline his body, discipline all of his members, his emotions, his thoughts, his yearnings, everything, how much more us?
Well, that's a great time for another sports analogy, which I know everybody's that's going to hear this is going to love that. But you think about when the playoffs come around for things like football, baseball, hockey, basketball, several different sports, and then even with the World Cup, where they're breaking it down by the brackets. You don't just get to go to the playoffs. You don't start your season and you're like, hey, I'm going to the playoffs. You have to endure a schedule, a grueling schedule to get to that. And you have to win enough games and all that stuff. So in essence, you are still qualifying. In football, in American football, it's 17 games. In basketball, it's 83 or 84, unless they've added more. I think baseball, you've got a total of 150 or something like that, 140 games. Is that accurate or close to accurate? It's somewhere up there. I venture to say it's quite a bit. I know it's over 100. I don't remember how high it is, but it's 100 and something games, and that's their schedule that they got to play. And they have to have a certain percentage to get qualified just to start. It's like starting all over again. You've already endured a whole grueling season. Now you're just getting started. And it's kind of the same thing with Paul. Like, I'm doing all of these things just to get qualified to run the race.
That's it.
And it's like, whoa, that's a different perspective. You know, something that you mentioned from Matthew 24, I just looked it up a second ago in the Amplified, and you said, be alert or be aware.
Yep.
If you go over to the Amplified version, they've got these little things in parentheses that kind of help some people who think like me, that gives us a little bit more of an expansion to help wrap your head around it. So it says to be alert, and next to that it says give strict attention, be cautious and active in faith, for you do not know the day which, whether it be near or far, of your Lord's coming. But understand this, if the head of the house had known the time of the night the thief was coming, he would have been on alert and nobody would have broke into the house, right? Therefore, you must follow me. You who follow me must be ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an hour that we do not know or expect. But I thought it was amazing how you did talk about alert, but they put so much special attention to the alert word, say, give strict attention, be cautious, and be active in your faith.
The thing that stuck out to me right there is active in your faith. Because
what do you think that means, being active in your faith?
Not, well, to be quite literal, not passive. I mean, but then I have a pretty analytical mind, and you know that. But the reality is, I'm going to give a gym analogy because, I love to go to the gym. If I am active in the gym, I'm actively participating in the workout. If I'm being passive in the gym, I'm looking at Facebook, I'm playing with my phone. I might lift a little here and a little there, but I'm not doing much. But if I'm being active, I'm cranking out the work. I'm grinding. I'm hitting the weight so hard that I hurt when I'm done.
Yeah.
And then when I get home, I'm still feeling it. So to be an active participant in our faith means that we actually have to be engaged in prayer, engaged in the word, engaged with our fellow believers, engaged with talking to others. Now, I know that hurts all of us, because there's always one of those things right there that one of us is not doing. Think about it. Whether it's not studying the word enough, not praying enough. Oh, there's one thing I left out. Oh, praising. Having little moments of praise and worship between you and the Lord, right? Praising his name, just in private. There's always moments to where there's something we're dropping the ball on if we're not careful. And we need to be actively chasing his presence, actively pursuing it. And in my opinion, men, we need to be more active than ever. I feel very strongly that the Holy Spirit has been saying, men, I'm calling you to step up. I'm calling you to take action. I'm calling you to put on the armor that I've given you. I have made a way where you haven't seen a way, and I've begun to, the way I hear it right now is I have an equipping process that I began that if you begin to participate in it, I'll accelerate the process so that you will be able to get out of the mire that's been holding you back for so many years. Those things that have been holding you back will no longer hold you back if you'll begin to engage me in my presence. But you're going to have to become an active participant. That's what I hear in my spirit.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's time that we need to stop just waiting. Actually, another thing, if you at the prophets of old, you see that they weren't necessarily given a word every other day or something like that. They would be given a word to do something or to live a certain way or to share something, and it might be several years before they're given another one. Well, what are they doing in the meantime?
Praying.
They're still doing what the last word told them to do.
Well, the biggest
that's what they're
thing
going to do until it changes.
The biggest misnomer most people have about prophets is they think that a prophet's ministry is all public. 80 to 90% of a prophet's ministry is in the private.
Yeah.
Prophets are also called to be watchmen, like the watchmen on the wall. They're called to be those that are spiritually aware of what's going on and interceding for their city, interceding for their nation, praying for their government, praying for their leaders. And people say, well, why would you pray for someone you don't like? Because the word of God commands you to. You're supposed to pray for your leaders. You're supposed to pray for the benefit of your leaders. Jesus says, give to Caesar what's Caesar's and to God's what's God's. He didn't say to...
You mean so I have to pray for Joe Biden?
Yes, you do, brother.
Just insult him? What?
That's it, man. You've got to pray for him, and you need to pray for his cabinet, and you need to pray for everyone that you disagree with. And I don't mean just
to insult them.
And the prayer isn't get them out of office. The prayer is God give them godly insight. God give them direction. Help them to follow your precepts for this nation. You know, we're supposed to pray blessings upon them, not curses. You know, when we try to praying a curse on someone, that's the same as doing witchcraft. And that's the area where a lot of people need to check themselves so they don't open themselves up for attack from the enemy.
Ouch.
I know.
It's so salty.
It's just what it is, brother. I mean, hey, I've learned these things, trust me, through the school of hard knocks.
Well, no, the truth is, so look, we weren't going to touch on it probably for another week or two, but, when it comes to political things, I've had to learn because I can get pretty passionate about it. And my wife is very well aware of this. And especially when we get closer to elections, I'll literally stand up in my house and I'm like, okay, here's the thing and blah, 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 blah. And I'll start just saying little different pieces of stuff. But the truth of the matter is in the last several years, I've started to realize that when these people come to office, especially the ones that I don't necessarily agree with or like, or if I know that they're just there for destruction, I've started to deal with myself by saying, you know what, I'm going to pray for their salvation. And if they don't get saved while they're in office, then maybe they'll get saved at some point after. And maybe that's something while they're in office will trigger them, or maybe the Lord will visit them in a dream or something like that. Because even then they have the choice to reject it or accept
That's
it.
right.
And, unfortunately, a lot of people that get into politics, even good people, if they don't have a good supporting cast and if they don't have their right head on their shoulders and if they're not connected to their creator, to the Lord, it can suck you in and it can deceive the most pure-hearted one there.
That's right.
So instead of and it's hard to try to change something when if you got 100 people swimming in one direction and one swimming in the other one, it gets pretty hard and you can get kicked and slapped and punched on the way through. So a lot of people just can't handle that and they, not even necessarily on purpose, they just end up succumbing to it.
Well,
and
That's why I
And
think
I
that
feel bad for a lot of those guys.
the graphics on The Chosen in the very beginning, where you see this fish swimming, and then one fish
Yeah,
goes against the flow, then another one. It's very depictive of what it means to pick up your cross and follow Jesus,
true.
because you're having to go against the flow. The word says that the heart of man is evil. And so we need to be chasing God, allowing his word to purify us daily, not when it's convenient, because we don't want to give precedent to those things that are evil. What do I mean? When we continuously are bombarded by the things around us that are not good. Because I would say that majority of humanity would believe that harming another human or stealing is wrong. But if we get so subjected to those things that where we become numb to it, to where it becomes like the normal thing, that's not good. That's not good for anyone. So the same thing is with all the other things, sexual immorality, self-harm, any of these things, it becomes so normal because we're so subjected to it. We need to remind ourselves by reading the word about what God says about these topics. Because it doesn't matter what people say about the topic. It matters what the Creator says about these topics.
Right. So if I'm understanding you correctly, Kirk, what you're telling me is that you also believe in the fact that regardless of which tribulation people choose to believe in, that they just need to be ready at all times.
At all times, in and out of season, my personal belief is you must keep your oil full. You must keep your wick trimmed, which is being engaged in the word and full of his spirit.
It's funny as you said it earlier, but I had a older pastor. He used to say this thing when he'd talk about it, and we'd be sitting in class or something, and he'd say, I know there's pre-trib in here, there's mid-trib, and there's post-trib people. He said, but I'm what they call pan-trib. People get all eyebrows furrowed, and they're like, what is that, pan-trib? He said, it'll all pan out in the end.
I remember him.
Either way I get to be with Jesus. That's what he'd say. And when he said it, I was like, man, that's one of the funniest things, and probably upset every single person in there.
I loved it.
I loved every minute of it.
I loved it when I heard that. I'd forgotten about that, to be honest with you, Vince.
Yeah. That was a good one, though. But the fact, like we've been talking about, though, is, and I hope this shows that the priority shouldn't be on when you go. The priority should be on making sure you're ready. And the priority should be that it's our responsibility to, like you said, make sure there's oil in the lamp and the wick is trimmed, which translating that to our modern day would be making sure that on the daily you're doing the absolute best you can to follow Christ, right? To make sure that he is still occupying that position as preeminent in your life, making sure that when he says, hey, I want you to do this, that you're doing it to the best of your ability. And look, you're going to have some days where you're going to screw it up. To my fellow believers out there, look, don't let the theological arguments, look, it's good to, like Isaiah says, come now, let us reason together, right? It's good to have discussions about this stuff. It sharpens us. It makes us better. It makes us go seek after the Lord. So I'm not saying to deny having the conversations. What I'm saying is don't allow these things like this that don't affect your salvation to become huge mountains when they're in reality just molehills, right? So
absolutely.
Why? And of course, us humans, we like to do that. We like to take and make mountains into molehills and molehills into mountains, right? But it's just one of those molehills, so don't make it into the mountain. Keep the mountains and the molehills the molehills. The important factor is is your salvation and that you're walking it out daily with fear and trembling.
A good analogy that I can think of about what you're talking about is like the relationship between a husband and wife. If a husband and wife don't take time to talk to each other, the relationship is strained. It doesn't matter which way you paint it. It doesn't matter if you want to. It doesn't matter if you're busy. It doesn't matter if it's work. If you don't spend time with each other, your relationship will suffer. And you're going to have to spend time with each other to remain close. So the reality is, it's just like that relationship. We need to spend time with our Creator in His Word, in prayer, in a little bit of praise and worship. It could even just be singing Amazing Grace, whatever. However the Lord and you work together for praise, it's all good. But the key is we need to stay engaged in our faith, active in our faith, being participants in the race, in the preparation. And that preparation is daily. I know some people just like you that have done marathons. I personally have never ran one either. Vince, don't feel bad. I don't mind running, but that's too much for me. So, but the thing is, the people that I know that prepare for these marathons, it's not a once or twice a week thing. It's a daily thing. It's a month to month thing. It's a not ending thing. While they're in preparation, it takes months to prepare. And generally, these individuals don't run one marathon. They keep running them. And so it's a lifestyle of keeping themselves in the ready. And just like that, that's how we're supposed to keep ourselves ready for Christ. Continuously, intentionally, with effort, with strain, going against the flow, even when it's inconvenient. That's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I do want to issue a slight correction. It's possible I might have said the 10 virgins were in Matthew 24, but I meant to say 25. So if I did say 24 instead, I apologize out there. So if anybody's hearing it, like, that's not Matthew 24, that's 25. I just I had gotten them swapped around. As a matter of fact, I do want to mention that specifically because it does talk about there's 5 virgins who made sure that they were prepared and had enough oil and extra oil, actually, and 5 that didn't. And in the Amplified Version, it says the 5 of them were foolish, using words like thoughtless, silly, and careless. And there were 5 that were wise, or they used the words farsighted, practical, and sensible. So in this sense, we don't need to live our Christian life as thoughtless, silly, and careless, just expecting God to clean up after us like some maid. But we need to be farsighted. We need to be practical and sensible in what we do. And that means that we need to spend time with Him. We need to spend time in His Word. And we need to make sure that we are prayed up, lit up, and ready to go.
Vince, are you saying that I can't float throughout life and just hope it all works out?
No, being a floater might work in Big Brother, but it sure don't work in life.
I agree with you, brother. It definitely doesn't work, especially in our faith. We cannot float just hoping everything pans out. I mean, I do agree that, it's all going to pan out in the end with, when the Lord comes back. However, when it comes to our faith, we can't just go with the flow and hope everything works. God tells us we're supposed to use wisdom. He actually tells us that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and that in the beginning, He created wisdom before He even created the world, which tells me that those 5 wise virgins were using the wisdom that God provided so that they could, be prepared, almost like a good project manager in his project, right? He looks at the forecast of what's needed. He has the materials available that he has to order, and he gets them all ready. The unwise project manager says, "Oh, we'll get to it whenever," and he doesn't pay attention to the, parts he needs, and he just doesn't order them on time. And the next thing you know, when everything's due, he's scrambling, and it's months away before he can get his parts. Mm-hmm. And so he misses his deadline and has to pay a massive fee to the company because he wasn't prepared. And that's not what we want. We don't want to be like the foolish project manager, so to speak, right? In my analogy, we want to be
Mm-hmm.
wise. We want to be prepared so that we have everything in order, everything in line, so that when Christ comes back, we're ready.
Yep. I
Now,
agree.
guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We really appreciate you joining us today. You know, there's several things that we would love to do for you. One, that would be pray for you. If you have a prayer request, please reach out to us. You can reach us at info@mooseministries.org. You can also go to mooseministries.org, the webpage, and you can leave us a message there on the contact page. Any prayer requests that you have, we would love to hear from you. If you have a show request, a topic that you would like for Vince and I to discuss, we would love to hear it. Go ahead and drop us a line there at mooseministries.org under the contact page. Let us know what you'd love to hear us talk about. Also, pastors, like Vince has told you several times before, we have a heart for you. We love the work that you do with you, your church, and the people that you're reaching. Please reach out to us. Let us know where you are. Let us know how we can get in touch with you. If there's any specific prayer requests that you have, we would love to pray for you. We would love to specifically by name lift you up in our prayers.
That's true.
Anything else, Vince?
Well, as you're saying that, I think that's kind of one of the points of doing this is to not only reach out to the rest of the body, but also to pastors and leaders. You guys are also on the front lines, and a lot of times you have that role, and you feel like there's nobody to talk to, there's nobody that you can just open up to because you're like, I either don't know how, or I don't feel safe, or I feel like anything I would say would get used against me in some way. You can share whatever you want with us. If you want to email us and contact us, and we can get back in contact with you, and we can just kind of exchange back and forth. You can feel free to share anything you need to with us. And unless it's illegal, we'll keep it between us.
That's right. The only way it'll get out is if it's something that we're required to, release by law.
Yep, that's it. So, and we'll help you walk through it, and maybe even help you heal and point you to Jesus even more. So,
That's it.
God bless you guys.
God bless y'all. Y'all have a wonderful day. Talk to you next time.
You too. See you around.